A city of palaces and temples blooms from the heart of a desert mountain. This is Petra, a metropolis carved entirely from solid rock by a society of desert nomads. How did these people master their brutal environment to create a thriving hub of trade and culture that rivaled the greatest cities of the ancient world? By the end of our journey, you will understand the incredible engineering secrets that made this desert miracle possible. We will explore how they conquered water scarcity in a parched land and why they chose to build their monuments for eternity inside the cliffs. What does it take for human ambition to truly leave a permanent mark on the world? The wealth of empires flowed through the hands of these desert traders long before a single monument was carved. The Nabateans commanded a network of trade routes that functioned as the ancient world's economic lifeline. Their most precious cargoes were frankincense and myrrh, aromatic resins so highly valued they were worth their weight in gold. These substances were not mere luxuries. They were essential for religious rituals, for medicine, and for masking the sense of crowded cities, making their transport a matter of profound importance across empires. Controlling this trade meant the Nabateans held immense influence, their caravans moving like slow, deliberate rivers of commerce across the most unforgiving landscapes on Earth. Their success, however, was not just about what they carried, but how they navigated the impossible vastness of the desert itself. They possessed a secret, intimate knowledge of the land that was their greatest asset. While other merchants saw only a barren, waterless death trap, the Nabateans saw a map of hidden springs, seasonal streams, and secret cisterns. They could guide their massive caravans from one nearly invisible water source to the next with uncanny precision. This mastery over the desert's single most critical resource, water, was the true foundation of their power. It allowed them to move goods where others could not, to dictate terms to powerful neighbors like the Romans and the Greeks, and to amass a fortune so vast it would eventually fund the carving of an entire city from stone. This transition from nomadic masters of logistics to settled architects of a metropolis is one of history's most remarkable transformations. The same genius that allowed them to find a single water hole in 1,000 miles of sand would soon be directed inward toward a more permanent ambition, building a capital that was both a fortress and a masterpiece. A narrow crack in the earth is the only way in. This is the Sick, a winding canyon so deep and slender that sunlight barely reaches its floor. For over a kilometer, this natural corridor snakes between cliffs that rise hundreds of feet high, their sheer faces leaning inward as if sharing a secret. To any approaching army, this passage was a death trap, a choke point where a handful of defenders could hold back an entire legion. But for the Nabateans, it was the perfect front door, a grand entrance that transformed a simple journey into an unforgettable experience. As ancient travelers made their way through this shadowy defile, their senses were primed for wonder. They would notice the small details first, the stone channels carved neatly into the canyon walls, carrying a steady trickle of precious water. They might spot a simple dam cleverly positioned to divert a flash flood. These were not just utilities, they were quiet announcements of the sophistication that lay ahead. The entire passage was designed to build anticipation, to create a feeling of moving from the mundane world into a place of power and mystery. The climax of this journey was a masterstroke of theatrical planning. The canyon walls would suddenly part, framing a breathtaking view of the Treasury, Petra's most famous facade, glowing in a sliver of sunlight. This was no accident. It was the culmination of a carefully orchestrated approach, proving that the Nabateans were not just engineers but brilliant psychologists. they understood that a city's true power lies not only in its defenses, but in its ability to inspire awe. They did not conquer the landscape with brute force. Instead, they listened to it, learning how to make the desert itself their greatest ally and most impressive monument. This mastery of the desert was made literal in the stone all around them. The same genius that guided caravans to hidden springs was now channeled into a single, monumental task: controlling water itself. In a land where rain might fall only a handful of times each year, the Nabateans engineered a system to capture every single drop. They did not just endure the desert, they reprogrammed it. Their most vital tools were the very cliffs that sheltered them. They carved channels with meticulous precision along the canyon walls, gutters that transformed entire rock faces into a catchment system. These stone conduits guided rainfall into a network of terracotta pipes, which then fed into more than 200 underground cisterns carved deep into the bedrock. This was not a simple collection method. It was a city-wide circulatory system, a living engine that pulsed with the seasonal rains. Their most brilliant move, however, was in handling the desert's greatest danger, the flash flood. A single storm miles away could send a crushing wall of water and debris through the narrow sick without warning. Instead of fighting this force, the Nabateans negotiated with it. They constructed a massive dam at the entrance of the canyon, complete with a diversion tunnel that skillfully redirected the torrential floodwaters away from the city center and into a different valley. They turned a destructive threat into a managed resource. This intricate web of dams, channels, and reservoirs could store millions of gallons of water, sustaining a population of perhaps 20,000 people and all their livestock through the long, dry years. It was this invisible network, hidden in plain sight, that truly built Petra. The magnificent facades were the declaration of wealth, but the water system was the source of it. How did they move from this mastery of survival to the creation of art on such a staggering scale? The answer lies not in the soft sand, but in the unyielding stone. Suddenly, the narrow canyon ends and the rock opens up to reveal a masterpiece glowing in the desert sun. This is Al-Khosneh, the Treasury, a facade of such intricate beauty that it seems impossible it was carved by human hands. Its columns soar upward, crowned with elaborate capitals, while statues of gods and mythical figures stand watch from their niches. The entire structure, from its peaked roof to the base of its doorways, was not built from individual blocks, but was painstakingly sculpted from the living rock of the cliff itself. The popular name, the Treasury, comes from a romantic local legend that a pharaoh hid his treasure in the stone urn at the very top of the monument. The truth, however, is even more fascinating. Scholars believe this was not a bank for gold, but a royal tomb or a grand temple, a sacred place meant to honor the dead or the divine. Its design is a beautiful puzzle, a blend of Nabatean artistic sensibilities with the architectural styles of Greece and Rome. Eagles, symbols of power, are carved beside figures of the goddess Isis, showing a culture that was deeply connected to its own traditions while also engaging with the wider world. This was a statement of sophistication, a declaration that the Nabateans were not isolated desert dwellers, but key players on an international stage. To create such a monument, the artisans had to work from the top down. They were suspended on ropes, dangling against the sheer cliff face, with only their skill and courage preventing a fatal plunge. With nothing but simple metal tools, they had to visualize the finished building within the solid rock, chiseling away everything that was not part of their grand design. Each strike of the hammer had to be precise. A miscalculation could ruin an entire column or statue, as there was no way to replace a piece of stone once it was chipped away. The sheer verticality of their workspace makes their achievement all the more breathtaking. They were not just carving a building, they were revealing it, uncovering a work of art that had been waiting inside the mountain for millennia. How did they manage such a feat of engineering and artistry? And why did they invest so much in creating these eternal stone houses? The answer lies not just in the grand facades, but in the hidden, silent spaces deep within the rock. Every single structure in Petra was born from a process of removal. This was an art of emptiness, where the final form was not assembled piece by piece, but was patiently revealed by chipping away everything that was not part of the vision. The Nabatean artisans were not builders in the traditional sense. They were sculptors on a colossal scale. Their technique, known as rock-cut architecture, is fundamentally different from stacking stones. In additive construction, a misplaced block can be reset, but here, every strike of the chisel was permanent. A single miscalculation in depth or angle could shatter a delicate cornice or ruin a statue's face, forcing them to abandon an entire project. This demanded a level of foresight that is difficult to comprehend. They had to hold the complete, three-dimensional image of the finished palace or tomb perfectly in their minds before they ever touched the rock. Their primary tools were simple yet effective. They used iron chisels and hammers, with the iron often hardened through a process called quenching, where the red-hot metal was rapidly cooled in water to make it stronger and more durable. For finer work and smoothing vast surfaces, they turned to the desert itself, using abrasive sand mixed with water to grind and polish the soft sandstone to a surprisingly fine finish. The process itself was methodical and deeply logical. It always began with the creation of a large, flat recess in the cliff face, a blank canvas of sorts. From this initial scaffold, teams of workers would then begin the painstaking work of moving inward, carving doorways, then rooms, then the interior details like benches, alcoves, and decorative niches directly out of the living stone. This was a subtractive art that demanded a unique spatial intelligence, a mind that could visualize not just the surface, but the hollow spaces within. It also required a profound understanding of the rock itself, its layers, its weaknesses, and its grain. They were not just artists, they were geologists reading the mountain to ensure their creations would stand for millennia. How did this incredible, permanent city, once bustling with life, eventually fade from memory and become lost to the world for centuries? Past the famous Treasury, the canyon widens to reveal an entire cliff face transformed into a city for the departed. This is the Necropolis, a sprawling district where death was met with grandeur. Here, the rock is adorned with the royal tombs, a collection of monumental facades that dwarf the viewer with their sheer scale. The urn tomb, the silk tomb, and the palace tomb stand as eternal neighbors, their massive porticos and multi-storied fronts carved directly into the mountain. These were far more than simple graves. They were audacious declarations of power, wealth, and social standing, designed to project a family's influence long after their lives had ended. You can almost feel the silent competition etched into the stone as each tomb vies for attention and prestige. The variety in their designs tells a story of a society in flux. The urn tomb presents a more severe, classical facade with its clean, powerful lines, while the palace tomb mimics the layered look of a Roman urban complex. But perhaps the most visually stunning is the silk tomb, named for the breathtaking, fluid ribbons of color that streak its surface. The sandstone here is a natural canvas of swirling pinks, yellows, and reds, a geological masterpiece that the artisans incorporated directly into their design. This incredible variation suggests different periods of construction and possibly even different guilds of craftsmen, each leaving their unique signature on the rock. Yet, stepping inside these colossal structures often reveals a surprising contrast. While the exteriors shout of public glory, the interiors tend toward a profound simplicity. Beyond the grand entrances lie quiet, unadorned burial chambers, but these rooms were not meant for the dead alone. Niches were carved for offerings, and benches were hewn from the rock to accommodate the living. These were spaces for commemorative feasts, where families would gather to share a meal in honor of their ancestors, connecting past and present in a perpetual ritual of remembrance. The true marvel is that this entire city of the dead, with all its intricate detail, was not built upward but carved inward. How did a society that perfected this art of subtraction ultimately vanish, leaving their stone metropolis to the silence of the desert? Yet the true heart of Petra was not carved into a cliff, but stood freely in the city center. The great temple complex was the bustling epicenter of Nabatean power, a place where politics, religion, and public life converged. For a long time, this sprawling site was buried under centuries of desert sand, its significance lost. Recent excavations have painstakingly uncovered its foundations, revealing a vast architectural statement built the traditional way, with countless stones stacked into colonnades and walls. This was not a monument of the dead, but a vibrant hub for the living. Imagine walking through a grand lower terrace shaded by columns and perhaps even graced with lush gardens, a startling oasis of green and order in the middle of the rugged canyon. The complex was designed to impress and to function, culminating in a steep, theater-like auditorium where hundreds could gather, likely to witness religious ceremonies or hear pronouncements from their rulers. The decorative details whisper of a city fully engaged with the wider world. Artisans carved stunning capitals in the shape of elephant heads, a creature not native to the Arabian desert, but a powerful symbol from the Hellenistic kingdoms to the west. They even imported luxurious marble, hauling it across vast distances to adorn their sacred spaces. This was more than just decoration. It was a conscious effort to position Petra as a cosmopolitan player, a capital that understood and embraced international styles. The very existence of such a massive, centrally planned complex points to a highly organized society with a strong, centralized government. Here, religion and state were not separate entities, they were two sides of the same coin. The king was likely also the high priest, and decisions of trade, law, and worship were all made under the watchful eyes of the gods. Discovering the great temple allows us to finally move past the silent, majestic tombs and hear the echoes of a bustling, sophisticated city, a place where the Nabatean elite negotiated, worshipped, and governed their desert empire. Just a short walk from the silent royal tombs, the mountain itself was hollowed out to create a space for the living. The great theater of Petra could seat a crowd of 8,000, an entire city's population gathered in a single, sweeping semicircle. Its construction reveals a society willing to reshape its own sacred landscape for the sake of civic life. To create this colossal auditorium, engineers carved directly into the slopes of a hill already occupied by the Necropolis. They did not shy away from this profound intersection of life and death. In fact, several older tombs were partially demolished to make room for the theater's grand design, a clear signal that the needs of the vibrant, breathing community were beginning to take precedence over even the most honored ancestral resting places. This was urban planning on a breathtaking scale, an ambitious reordering of the city's very soul. The choice of location was also an acoustic masterstroke. The solid rock that formed the theater's stage and seating did more than just provide structural support. It acted as a natural amplifier, capturing the voices of actors, musicians, and orators, and projecting them with perfect clarity to every one of the 8,000 seats. A whisper from the stage could be heard at the very top row, a feat of engineering that modern architects still admire. imagine the scene during a major performance. The entire community, from merchants and caravan masters to water engineers and stone carvers, would be gathered together under the open sky. The air would be filled with the sound of music, the rhythms of poetry, or the urgent announcements of civic leaders. This was not merely a place for entertainment. It was a crucible of shared experience, a tool for unifying a diverse and growing population. In the heart of their rock-hewn city, the Nabateans carved out a space for laughter, for drama, and for the simple, powerful act of being together. How does a civilization that invested so deeply in its public life and its eternal monuments ultimately manage to disappear? The same stones that echoed with drama in the theater now thrummed with the rhythm of commerce under countless footsteps. This was the Colonnaded Street, the city's true lifeblood, a wide, paved artery stretching through the heart of Petra. Flanked by continuous rows of columns, this grand thoroughfare was far more than a simple path. It was a covered pedestrian mall where the shade of its porticos offered refuge from the desert sun, creating a perfect environment for the city's bustling economic and social life. On either side, the ground floors of buildings opened into a succession of shops and market stalls, their interiors carved directly into the rock or built from stone blocks. Here, the exotic goods that built the Nabatean fortune were finally unpacked and displayed. The air would have been thick with the scent of spices, the rich smell of leather, and the faint, sweet perfume of frankincense. You could hear a dozen different languages being haggled by merchants from Egypt, Greece, Rome, and India, all drawn to this crossroads of the world. This street was not just a market, it was a living display of Petra's global reach. Walking its length was a journey through the entire known world, with every step offering a new treasure. But this vibrant scene was also a testament to profound change. The very design of the colonnaded street, with its orderly rows of columns and specific types of public buildings, was a hallmark of Roman urban planning. After the Roman Empire formally annexed the Nabatean kingdom in the year 106 CE, Petra began to layer a new identity over its original blueprint. The Romans did not destroy the city, they built upon it, adding their own stamp of infrastructure and civic life. One of the most telling additions was the Nymphaeum, a monumental public fountain that would have stood as a marvel of both engineering and social gathering. This was not a simple well, it was an ornate multi-tiered structure, often decorated with statues and marble, from which fresh, clean water cascaded continuously into a large basin. In a desert city, such a display was the ultimate symbol of Roman generosity and control over nature. It provided drinking water for people and animals, but its true purpose was grander. It was a place to see and be seen, a cool, refreshing oasis that demonstrated the benefits of being part of the vast Roman Empire. The street itself, once perhaps a more organic Nabatean path, was now formalized and paved with stone, a physical manifestation of Roman order imposed upon the desert metropolis. This cultural layering makes Petra's story so compelling. You can see the original Nabatean genius in the water channels that fed the Nymphaeum, and the Roman influence in the classical style of the columns that lined the street. The city was evolving, adapting to a new political reality while holding onto the core of what made it powerful. So what happens when the very trade routes that created this magnificent city suddenly change course, leaving its bustling heart to fall silent? The bustling commerce of the colonnaded street eventually gives way to a different kind of path, one that leads not to markets but to the sky. For those who sought the spiritual heart of Petra, the true journey was just beginning. It demanded a pilgrimage up a relentless staircase of 800 steps, each one carved directly from the mountain. This was not a walk for the casual visitor. It was a test of will, a slow, arduous ascent that mirrored the Nabateans' own struggle to impose their vision upon the world. With every step, the city below shrank, its noises fading into a profound silence broken only by the wind and your own breath. The climb itself was a ritual, stripping away the mundane and building anticipation for a meeting with the divine. And then, at the summit, the mountain itself seemed to open up. Ad-Dare, the monastery, stands not as a thing of intricate decoration, but as a monument of pure, overwhelming scale. Its facade is colossal, even larger than the Treasury, yet it is strikingly plain. The absence of elaborate statues and fine carvings is not a lack of skill, but a deliberate choice. Here, the power is in the sheer mass of the rock, in the clean, bold lines that reach toward the heavens. This is architecture as a raw, elemental force. The name, the monastery, comes from crosses carved into an interior wall centuries later, when Byzantine monks used the hollowed-out chamber, but its original purpose was far grander. Most scholars believe this was a temple dedicated to the deified King Obodas I, or perhaps his tomb. Its lonely, majestic position on the edge of the world was no accident. This was a place for ceremonies that connected the Nabatean elite directly to their gods, a sanctuary where the king could be venerated as a divine figure long after his death. To stand before it is to understand a different kind of ambition. The treasury was designed to awe travelers arriving by trade. The monastery was built to commune with the cosmos. The incredible effort required to build here, hauling workers, tools, and supplies up this impossible terrain, speaks to a spiritual drive that matched their engineering genius. This was not just a building project, it was an act of profound faith, a declaration that their kingdom was worthy of a place among the gods. What does it mean for a civilization to invest so much of its soul into stone, only to have its voice eventually fall silent? The sheer rock face of the monastery was not just a monument, it was a prayer. This profound spiritual drive was woven into the very identity of the Nabateans, a people whose gods were as elemental as the landscape they mastered. To truly understand the soul of Petra, we must meet the deities who presided over its creation. At the head of their pantheon stood Dashara, a name meaning he of the Shara mountains. He was not a god depicted in human form, but was often represented by a simple, powerful block of stone or a towering obelisk. This was a divine presence perfectly suited to a people who carved their world from solid rock. Dashara was the god of the mountain, of power, and of the life-giving rains that would occasionally break upon the high peaks. His spirit was in the very cliffs that sheltered the city, making every carved facade an act of devotion. Alongside him reigned his powerful consort, the goddess Al-Azhar. She was a celestial force associated with the planet Venus, the brilliant morning star that guided desert travelers. Al-Azhar was a deity of protection, of warfare, and of the life-sustaining oases that dotted the wilderness. Where Dashara represented the unyielding strength of the mountain, Al-Azhar embodied the precious, fluid power of survival in a harsh land. Together, they formed a divine partnership that mirrored the Nabateans' own relationship with their environment, a balance of solid permanence and vital, flowing resources. This was not an isolated belief system. The Nabateans were cultural magpies, absorbing and adapting gods from their powerful neighbors. They incorporated elements of Egyptian, Greek, and Mesopotamian deities into their own practices, creating a flexible and cosmopolitan spirituality. Alat, a mother goddess similar to the Greek Athena, was worshipped here, as was the Syrian god Bolshamin. This was a strategic spiritual openness, reflecting their position at the crossroads of empires. The high places, those sanctuaries carved atop Petra's peaks, were where this communion happened. Here, priests would perform rituals under the open sky, making offerings on stone altars to secure the favor of these powerful beings. The intricate carvings of eagles, lions, and winged figures on the tomb facades were not mere decoration. They were sacred symbols, protective spirits, and divine messengers linking the human realm to the celestial one. This rich spiritual framework provided the ultimate justification for their monumental project. Carving a city from the mountain was not just an engineering feat or an economic statement. It was an act of cosmic order, a way of aligning their human kingdom with the will of the gods who dwelled within the stone. The entire city was a vast, open-air temple, a holy landscape where every chisel strike resonated with divine purpose. But the true genius of Petra's water system is found not in the grand gestures, but in the small, clever details. Tucked away from the main channels was a network of pressurized terracotta pipes, an innovation so advanced it feels almost out of place in the ancient world. These were not simple conduits for moving water. They were the capillaries of the city, delivering life to its highest and most difficult-to-reach corners. The pipes themselves were engineering marvels, carefully crafted from baked clay and fitted together with such precision that their joints were sealed with a strong lime mortar to prevent any precious drops from leaking into the thirsty ground. This allowed the Nabateans to perform what seems like a miracle in the desert. They made water run uphill. They accomplished this using a principle called the inverted siphon. By creating a sealed, pressurized system, they could force water to climb a slope, as long as the destination was lower than the originating source. This meant that elite residences perched high on the cliffs, or even the sacred high places on the mountaintops, could have a reliable, constant supply of fresh water. Imagine the luxury of a hilltop garden, a verdant terrace blooming with flowers and shade trees in the midst of a barren landscape, all sustained by this hidden, climbing river. But the system was also ruthlessly practical. The water flowing from the distant springs was not always clean, often carrying sand and fine debris that could clog the narrow pipes. So the Nabateans built small, clever sedimentation tanks at key points in the network. As the water entered these tanks, its flow would slow, allowing the suspended particles to settle to the bottom before the cleaner water continued its journey. This was micro-level management of a vital resource, a testament to a society that thought several steps ahead. The sophistication of this pressurized network would not be matched in Europe for more than 1,000 years. While the grand facades proclaimed their power to visitors, this hidden lattice of pipes was the quiet, humming engine of their daily comfort and survival, proving that their greatest strength lay not in spectacle, but in sustaining life itself against all odds. The power of the Nabatean kings now flowed through a new channel, that of imperial Rome. In the year 106 CE, the Roman Emperor Trajan formally absorbed their kingdom into the empire, creating the province of Arabia Petra. This was not a violent conquest that left the city in ruins, but a calculated political absorption. The Romans were master administrators, and they recognized the immense value of this desert hub. Petra became a provincial capital, its name now officially stamped on the maps of the empire. Life in the city did not screech to a halt. In many ways, it continued with a familiar rhythm, but a new layer of Roman identity was steadily being applied over the original Nabatean blueprint. The Nabateans retained their language and many of their traditions, yet the symbols and structures of Roman power became increasingly impossible to ignore. The Romans saw the city not as something to be replaced, but as an asset to be improved and integrated. They expanded the colonnaded street, formalizing it with the rigid, orderly lines of classic Roman urban planning. They constructed a massive triumphal arch at the city's entrance, a stone proclamation of imperial victory and control for every visitor to see. new administrative buildings likely rose, housing the Roman officials who now collected taxes and enforced the law of a distant emperor. This period was one of both prosperity and subtle erosion. Petra thrived as a Roman capital, its name still carrying weight across the region, but the very nature of its existence was shifting. The independent spirit that had driven the Nabatean kings to carve their own destiny from the rock was now tempered by the demands of a vast, centralized empire. The trade routes that had been their exclusive domain were now part of the Roman machine, their flow subject to the empire's broader economic strategies. This annexation was not the end of Petra, but the beginning of a long, slow transformation. It was a move that secured the city's relevance for another century, yet simultaneously planted the seeds for its eventual quietus, as the world it was built to connect began to slowly turn away. The lifeblood of Petra was not water but trade, and that river of commerce began to change its course. As the Roman Empire consolidated its power, new, cheaper maritime routes across the Red Sea and the Indian Ocean started to bypass the overland caravan networks that had been the city's source of immense wealth. Incense that once traveled for months across the desert on the backs of camels could now be shipped in vast quantities by boat, undercutting the Nabatean merchants who had once held a monopoly. The very geography that had made Petra a perfect crossroads now worked against it, leaving the city economically stranded as the world's trade maps were redrawn. This was a slow, insidious decline, a gradual draining of the city's financial vitality over generations. Then, in the year 363, the earth itself rebelled. A massive earthquake, one of the most powerful in the region's recorded history, struck with devastating force. The tremor did not just topple columns and shatter facades. It targeted the city's most vital organ, its intricate water management system. The carefully engineered dams were cracked, the stone channels along the canyon walls were shattered, and the hidden network of terracotta pipes was crushed beyond immediate repair. In a city built to conquer the desert, the loss of its water was a mortal wound. The earthquake was a catastrophe from which Petra could not rebound. The wealth needed for such a monumental reconstruction was already fading, siphoned away by shifting trade winds. The population dwindled as the urban core became increasingly unlivable without a reliable water supply. People retreated, adapting the grand tombs as simple dwellings and the colonnaded street as a place for local trade, but the grand vision of a global metropolis was gone. Petra did not vanish overnight. It lingered for centuries, a diminished shadow of its former self, its grand monuments repurposed by Byzantine monks and later local Bedouin tribes. But to the wider world, this city of carved wonders simply faded into legend, a ghost in the desert sands, its story a quiet testament to how even the most permanent of human achievements can be undone by the slow turning of the world and the sudden fury of nature. For centuries, Petra had become a whisper, a secret held tightly by the Bedouin tribes who made its weathered tombs their seasonal home. To the wider world, the city was little more than a traveler's fable, a lost metropolis many believed had never existed at all. That all changed with the arrival of one extraordinary man, a scholar and adventurer named Johann Ludwig Burckhardt. His quest was not for treasure but for knowledge, a burning curiosity about the uncharted corners of the world. To achieve it, he undertook a transformation so complete it was a work of art in itself. He learned to speak Arabic with flawless fluency, immersed himself in the intricacies of Islamic law and custom, and adopted the name Sheikh Ibrahim ibn Abdallah. In this elaborate disguise, he traveled where no European could safely venture, earning the trust of local leaders and caravan masters. His journey to find the fabled city was a masterpiece of careful deception. He convinced his wary guides that he had made a sacred vow to sacrifice a goat at the tomb of the prophet Aaron, a site he knew was located in the mountains above the hidden valley. It was a perfect pretext, a religious pilgrimage that no devout Muslim would deny. As he was led through the narrow, shadowy confines of the Sikh, he must have contained his astonishment, maintaining the calm demeanor of a scholar while his eyes took in the ancient water channels and the sheer, sculpted cliffs. Then the canyon opened. For a few precious moments he stood before the glowing pink facade of the Treasury, its grandeur undeniable proof that the legends were true. He could not linger, could not sketch or openly investigate without shattering his cover and risking his life. He made his sacrifice at the high place and departed, his heart and mind racing with the magnitude of what he had seen. In the privacy of his journals, he recorded the discovery in careful, academic prose, a quiet note that would soon ignite a firestorm of global fascination. Burckhardt's story is a testament to intellectual courage, proving that some of the greatest explorations are not just of place, but of identity, all fueled by an enduring, insatiable curiosity. Burckhardt's discreet journal entry was a key turning a lock that had been closed for centuries. Soon, waves of explorers and archaeologists, armed with maps and a new scientific rigor, followed the path he had blazed. They were not content simply to marvel at the grand facades. They arrived with shovels and brushes, determined to read the story written in the dust and debris that had filled the city's streets for generations. The 20th century marked the beginning of systematic excavation, a slow, patient process of peeling back time itself. Teams worked season after season, unearthing the foundations of the Great Temple, clearing the colonnaded street, and revealing a city far more complex and layered than anyone had anticipated. Each pottery shard, each coin, and each inscription added another sentence to Petra's epic narrative, transforming it from a legend into a detailed chapter of human history. This global recognition culminated in 1985, when Petra was declared a UNESCO World Heritage Site. This was not merely an honorary title. It was a formal acknowledgement that this city belongs not just to Jordan, but to all of humanity, a treasure of such unparalleled cultural value that its protection is a shared responsibility for the entire world. This status created a vital framework for balancing two conflicting needs: public access and permanent preservation. The very act of loving a place can also destroy it. Millions of footsteps now tread the ancient Sikh each year, and the soft sandstone is vulnerable to more than just wind and rain. The touch of countless hands, the vibration of nearby traffic, and even the humidity from a crowd's breath contribute to a slow, steady erosion. The magnificent, swirling colors of the silk tomb are not just fading from sunlight, they are threatened by the sheer volume of their own admirers. In response, a continuous conservation effort is now woven into the fabric of Petra. The Jordanian government works in close partnership with international experts, employing advanced technology to monitor the stability of the cliffs and the delicate facades. They clean soot from ancient tombs that were once used as dwellings, repair 2,000-year-old Nabatean dams to handle modern flash floods, and carefully consolidate crumbling stone with materials designed to be both strong and sympathetic to the original rock. This is a race against time, not to rediscover the city, but to sustain the miracle that the Nabateans left behind. How do we protect a masterpiece from the consequences of its own rediscovery, ensuring that the wonder we feel today can be passed intact to the generations still to come? Even with all we have uncovered, the stone walls of Petra still guard profound and tantalizing secrets. The city's most enduring mysteries are not just about what we have found, but about what remains deliberately hidden from us. High above the main city, perched on a windswept plateau, sits the high place of sacrifice. This is not a building, but a ceremonial platform carved directly from the mountain peak, complete with altars and ritual basins. We know it was sacred, but the precise nature of the ceremonies performed here is a subject of intense debate. Was it a place for animal offerings to appease the gods Dashara and Al-Azhar? Did priests here seek divine guidance under the vast desert sky, interpreting the stars or the flight of birds? The silence of the rock offers no easy answers, leaving us to piece together the rituals from scattered clues and comparisons to neighboring cultures. This uncertainty extends far beyond a single mountaintop. The Nabateans were masters of record-keeping for business, using written contracts and receipts for their vast trade deals. Yet they left almost no written histories, no royal chronicles, and very few personal accounts. Their language, a precursor to Arabic, survives mainly in brief, formal inscriptions on tombs. This means the intimate details of their daily lives, the jokes they told, the songs they sang, the arguments they had in the market, are almost entirely lost. We can infer their political structure from the scale of their public works, but we do not know the names of most of their kings or the specific laws that govern their society. Their entire world is interpreted through the silent language of archaeology, through the trash they left behind and the spaces they shaped. This veil of silence fuels the most exciting possibility of all, that entire sections of the city still lie completely undiscovered. The soft sandstone cliffs are riddled with natural caves and fissures, and it is entirely plausible that a sealed tomb, or even a repository of scrolls, a lost library of Nabatean knowledge remains hidden, waiting for its moment of revelation. Modern technology is now our greatest ally in this search. Ground-penetrating radar can map subterranean chambers without lifting a single shovel of earth. LiDAR, which uses laser pulses to create a detailed three-dimensional model of the terrain, can reveal the outlines of buried structures invisible to the naked eye, structures hidden under sand or dense vegetation in the surrounding valleys. Each new scan promises a potential revolution, a chance to find that one piece of evidence that could finally give voice to this silent, magnificent city. The story of Petra is not a closed book resting on a shelf. It is a living narrative with its most compelling chapters perhaps still waiting to be read. The Nabateans understood that the ground beneath their feet could turn from foundation to foe in an instant. Living in a landscape fractured by fault lines, they engineered their city not just for beauty, but for survival, building a hidden resilience into the very bones of their structures. For their freestanding buildings, raised from the ground with stone blocks, they developed a brilliant shock-absorbing system. The mortar holding these stones together was not a rigid glue. It was a specially formulated, flexible lime-based mix designed to give slightly under stress, allowing walls to sway and settle during a tremor instead of shattering. But their most clever trick was hidden within the walls themselves. They strategically laid horizontal beams of wood, often imported cedar, between the courses of stone. Think of these not as structural supports, but as built-in shock absorbers. During an earthquake, these wooden layers would compress and flex, dissipating the violent energy of the shaking and preventing catastrophic collapse. This was a profound application of simple materials to solve a complex problem, an ancient form of seismic engineering that modern builders still study with admiration. For their most famous creations, the tombs and temples carved from the cliffs, their greatest defense was the mountain itself. A structure built from individual blocks can be shaken apart, but a facade carved from a single, continuous mass of rock moves as one with the earth. The entire mountain became its foundation, a monolithic anchor that offered unparalleled stability. This forward-thinking approach to disaster mitigation was not born from abstract theory, but from a deep, empirical reading of their environment. They learned from past quakes, observed the weaknesses in other construction methods, and innovated solutions that respected the immense power of nature. Their goal was a legacy in stone, and they ensured it would endure not just against the slow wear of time, but against the sudden, violent fury of the earth. This commitment to permanence raises a final, humbling question. How does a civilization that planned so meticulously for the future ultimately prepare for its own disappearance from the world stage? The same hands that carved palaces from cliffs also perfected a script to claim them. Across the facades of Petra, often tucked beside a grand doorway or beneath a carved eagle, you will find the elegant, flowing marks of the Nabatean script. This was not the blocky, formal writing of monuments, but a practical, cursive hand, a direct ancestor of the modern Arabic alphabet. Its letters curve and connect, designed for speed and clarity, a script born from a society of merchants who needed to keep good records. These inscriptions are our most direct line to the Nabatean people, yet they remain deeply frustrating. They are almost always brief and starkly formulaic. A typical carving might read, "This is the tomb that a son of B made for himself and his children forever," or "For Dashara, the god of our Lord." They are legal claims and religious dedications, not personal stories. They tell us who owned a tomb, but not what they laughed about, what they feared, or what they dreamed. In their very brevity, however, they speak volumes about the society that produced them. The fact that these inscriptions exist at all, carved permanently into the most valuable real estate in the city, tells us that literacy and a sense of individual ownership were important enough to be etched for eternity. You did not need to be a king to leave your name on the rock, but you did need to be someone of means. These short texts reinforce a social hierarchy written in stone, a public record of who mattered enough to be remembered. The true legacy of this script, however, unfolded far beyond the canyon walls. As Nabatean traders traveled and their political influence waned, their practical, efficient cursive script evolved. It was adopted and refined by Arab tribes, gradually transforming into the classical Arabic script that would one day carry the Quran across continents. This is perhaps their most enduring export, a cultural influence that outlasted their empire and shaped the linguistic landscape of a vast region. To stand before a tomb inscription in Petra is therefore a remarkable experience. You are looking at the direct precursor to a script used by hundreds of millions of people today. Each carved name is a silent shout across the centuries, a fragile thread connecting a specific individual in a lost city to the flow of human history itself. What would we give to hear the full story behind that single, stubborn name? Beyond the silent drama of the royal tombs and temples lay a city that was, above all else, a home. While the kings and merchants commissioned eternal monuments of stone, the vast majority of Petra's people lived in a more transient world. Their homes were not carved into cliffs, but built from sun-dried mud brick in the city's sprawling outskirts. These neighborhoods have largely vanished, weathered back into the earth by centuries of wind and rain, leaving behind only faint outlines and stone foundations. This erosion of the ordinary creates a historical illusion, making it seem as if Petra was only a city of the dead and the divine, when in truth it was a vibrant, working community. Its heartbeat was not the occasional royal ceremony, but the constant, everyday labor of its citizens. These were the farmers who coaxed wheat and barley from terraced plots in the surrounding valleys, the herders who tended flocks of sheep and goats on the arid hillsides, and the artisans who supplied a bustling metropolis with everything from pottery and textiles to metal tools. The marketplace would have been a symphony of bartering and gossip, where the scent of baking bread mingled with the earthy smell of animal hides and the sharp tang of spices. Families gathered for meals built around staples like lentils, dates, and flatbreads, occasionally supplemented with meat from their livestock. Camels, the engines of Nabatean wealth, would have been a constant presence, their groans and grunts a familiar soundtrack in the streets. Social life pulsed through the city's communal spaces. It was in the public baths where people went to get clean and catch up on the latest news, and in the theater where the entire community could share the experience of a play or a musical performance. This was the real Petra, a place of morning chores, afternoon markets, and evening gatherings, a living community whose stories are written not in immortal stone, but in the fragile, forgotten remnants of their daily lives. This cultural blending was a conscious choice, not an accident. Walk through Petra and you are reading a stone dictionary of the ancient world. An Egyptian cavetto cornice, that distinctive curved molding above a doorway, might crown a facade whose columns are purely Greek in proportion. Just a few steps away, a statue could depict the goddess Isis with the features of the Greek Aphrodite, her identity gracefully merging to appeal to different devotees. This was not haphazard copying. It was a sophisticated visual language, a way for the Nabateans to signal to every visitor that they understood their culture, that they shared common artistic ground. A merchant from Alexandria would see the familiar ripple of a Greek pediment and feel a sense of recognition. A diplomat from Rome would observe the orderly plan of the colonnaded street and recognize the logic of his own urban centers. This architectural fluency built instant bridges of trust and familiarity, smoothing the path for incredibly complex negotiations over the value of incense or the tariffs on silk. Their genius lay in selective adaptation. They took the elements that served their needs and their aesthetic, but they always filtered them through a distinctly Nabatean sensibility. The result was a style that was both international and uniquely their own. The Treasury is the ultimate example, a facade that feels Greek at first glance, yet is executed with a fluidity and a sense of vertical drama that is completely native to the rock-carving tradition of the desert. This ability to speak many cultural languages without losing their own accent was the secret to their diplomatic and economic endurance. They created a city where everyone felt somewhat at home, yet everyone was simultaneously aware they were in a place unlike any other. In a world of clashing empires, Petra stood as a testament to the power of connection, a neutral ground where the symbols of power were not weapons, but works of art. How does a city that mastered the art of cultural fusion ultimately navigate the final, most powerful influence of all, the slow erasure of its own identity by the sands of time? Every single chisel strike was an act of reverence. The Nabateans did not see the sandstone cliffs as a passive material waiting to be shaped. They perceived the mountain as a living, spiritual entity, the physical body of their chief god, Dashara. His very name, meaning he of the Shara Mountains, anchored his divinity not in a distant heaven, but in the immediate, towering landscape that surrounded them. This belief transforms our understanding of their entire project. They were not simply building a city out of rock. They were carefully revealing a city that already existed within it, a divine blueprint hidden in the heart of the mountain, waiting for human hands to uncover it. This turns the arduous labor of construction into the highest form of worship, a continuous dialogue with the God who provided both their shelter and their spiritual identity. Think of the master artisans suspended on ropes against a sheer cliff face. They were not mere laborers. In a very real sense, they were priests, their hammers and chisels acting as sacred tools to liberate the holy forms imprisoned within the stone. This profound spiritual relationship elevates every carved structure beyond architecture. A tomb was far more than a house for the dead. It was an eternal dwelling place nestled within the body of Dashara himself, a permanent return of the soul to its divine source. The grandeur of a facade was not just for showing off wealth, it was a measure of devotion, a public demonstration of piety carved for all eternity. This is the deepest, most resonant layer of meaning behind the rose-red city. Petra is not merely a marvel of engineering, a testament to human ambition and ingenuity. It is a theological statement written in stone, a permanent prayer offered to the mountain that was both their home and their god. The same soft sandstone that yielded so gracefully to Nabatean chisels is now the source of the city's fragility. This beautiful, porous rock is in a constant, slow-motion conversation with the elements, a dialogue that conservationists must now urgently interpret. Wind scours the intricate carvings, carrying tiny, abrasive particles that act like nature's sandpaper, smoothing away details over centuries. Water, the very resource the Nabateans mastered, now seeps into cracks and fissures. When it evaporates under the desert sun, it leaves behind crystallized salt. These salt crystals expand with tremendous force, prizing tiny fragments of stone from the facades in a process called salt weathering. It is a patient, inexorable decay. The modern challenge, however, comes not just from nature, but from the city's own rediscovery. The breath of thousands of visitors each day raises the humidity within the narrow sick and the tomb chambers, creating a microclimate that encourages biological growth and stone decay. The simple human act of touching a wall, repeated millions of times, gradually polishes away carved details and transfers oils from skin to stone, altering its surface chemistry. To combat this, experts employ a mix of ancient wisdom and space-age technology. They carefully grout open cracks with specially formulated mortars designed to match the original stone's composition and flexibility, ensuring repairs move and breathe with the natural rock. Over particularly vulnerable areas, they construct protective shelters. These are not merely roofs, they are carefully engineered structures designed to deflect wind and rain while minimizing their visual impact on the ancient skyline. The ultimate goal is a heartbreakingly difficult balance. How do you share a masterpiece with the world without the world's love ultimately destroying it? This is the silent, ongoing battle fought in Petra, a race to preserve the echo of a civilization against the relentless passage of time and the gentle yet corrosive touch of admiration. The same stone that was a prayer to the Nabateans became a portal for modern dreamers. Petra's dramatic re-entry into the world's consciousness did not end with archaeologists and historians. It ignited the imagination of artists and storytellers. Perhaps its most famous modern appearance was as the fictional resting place of the Holy Grail in the film Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. When Harrison Ford, as Indy, rode through the narrow sick and that first breathtaking view of the Treasury was revealed, it was not just a plot point, it was a global reintroduction. The filmmakers used the city's inherent mystery and grandeur as a perfect backdrop for a quest for a divine relic, cementing Petra in popular culture as the ultimate symbol of ancient adventure. This was not a new idea, merely a new medium. For centuries before the camera, poets had tried to capture its essence in verse. The 19th century English poet Dean Burgon famously described it as a rose-red city half as old as time, a line that has become almost inseparable from Petra's identity, perfectly capturing its impossible beauty and staggering antiquity. Painters struggling with the shifting desert light attempted to render its swirling colors and monumental scale onto canvas, each interpretation adding another layer to its legend. This cultural footprint is a powerful force. It ensures that Petra lives on not just as a historical site to be studied, but as an icon that lives in our collective psyche. It represents the allure of the unknown, the romance of discovery, and the enduring power of human ambition carved in stone. The very image of that rose-red facade, reproduced in countless books, films, and artworks, now draws people from every corner of the globe. They come not just to see a ruin, but to step into a living myth, to walk the same path as Indiana Jones and stand in the shadow of a poet's dream. This proves that the allure the Nabateans so carefully built into their city, that sense of awe and wonder meticulously orchestrated from the moment one enters the sick, remains as potent today as it was 2,000 years ago. The city's greatest trick was to make itself eternal not just in stone but in the human imagination. The silent, rose-red facades of Petra are more than ancient ruins, they are a permanent lesson in human ingenuity. This city stands as a testament to a people who did not simply survive their harsh environment, but learned to converse with it, to negotiate with its dangers and harness its hidden strengths. The Nabateans transformed the desert's greatest threat, water scarcity, into their most powerful tool, building a hidden circulatory system that allowed a metropolis to bloom in the heart of a mountain. Their architectural ambition was not an act of defiance against the rock, but a profound collaboration with it, a spiritual undertaking that revealed palaces and tombs from within the living stone. Petra's story is one of breathtaking adaptation, from nomadic traders reading the subtle signs of the desert to master architects carving a legacy meant to last for eternity. It challenges our modern assumptions about what is possible, reminding us that vision and resilience can build wonders in the most unlikely of places. If this journey through the lost city has inspired you, we would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Subscribe to keep exploring history's greatest mysteries